everybody, it's Garen Cohn with the American Warrior Radio Show, and we are blessed today to have an old friend and associate and broadcast partner, actually, with us many years ago on American Warrior Radio. For about 5 of the 6 years we were on the air, we had a wonderful segment called Heal the Warrior, Heal the Country, hosted by none other than my good friend and PhD Dr. Scott Fairchild. Doc, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Lima Charlie, so good to be back. It's so good to be able to get this information out to our warriors and their family members and help them in any way we can.
Well, just for those folks that hadn't watched one of the previous episodes from years back, give our audience a little, just share your bona fides. What is it about you that makes you expert in PTSD? But even before that, you're a veteran, disabled veteran yourself. Share a little bit about your military experience.
Well, I spent 21 years on active duty. I was not specifically in a combat zone, but I did jump out of perfectly good airplanes, and now I've got the consequences for it. So I enjoyed some administrative time on active duty. Then I also got into some combat units and had the pleasure and opportunity to jump with the Great 82nd Airborne Division and do quite a few things. Did some prescribing of medicines in the psychopharmacology fellowship. Worked as an aviation psychologist with aviators. Trained in the first aviation psychology or flight psychologist. It was a good life and a good opportunity to help and support veterans. And even though I've taken off the uniform after 20 years, I like to say that I continue to support veterans, even not wearing the actual military uniform.
Oh, for sure. And your time in service was greatly influenced by your education because you have your doctorate in psychology, and you were a practicing psychologist, right, while you were in the Army?
That is correct. Yeah, for the last 11 years, I was a practicing psychologist. Prior to that, even in my administrative roles, I ran a human resource center dealing with equal opportunity, also with drugs and alcohol and the like. But once I moved into the psychology realm and did my internship at Walter Reed, then I went out and did things in the world of psychology, primarily at Fort Bragg, Fort Polk, and a few other undisclosed locations.
And after your retirement, as you said, you continue to serve our past and present military members and their families. You founded Baytree Behavioral Health. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yes, I did. I spent a couple of years up in Tennessee supporting the Great 160th Aviation Unit there at Fort Campbell, as well as their people there, and had a clinic, opened a clinic or worked with a friend there, and then decided to relocate to Florida and open Baytree Behavioral Health. I remember my first week I had a total of 7 patients, but
every day.
Yeah, that's what I do every day now. So, but anyway, I had the opportunity to open Baytree Behavioral Health, which now has been around for over 20 years, and we pride ourselves in serving veterans. Currently now owned by Dr. Joseph Walden, and I am so proud of him. He is doing a great job in continuing to serve veterans. His father was a Vietnam veteran who died early as a result of Agent Orange. So we're all in the family, and we're looking at bringing back a couple other folks to help us out because we're overwhelmed with the volume of people that have difficulties and also need help with their VA.
And I want to speak specifically to the nature of your practice, but you mentioned Dr. Walden, Joseph Walden, who's now the owner of Baytree Behavioral Health. You've retired a couple times now, but you were a mentor to him as well as so many others in the field of psychology here in Brevard County, Florida.
It's been a pleasure. It's really been a pleasure. He is so dedicated. And we have Dr. Eatman on board. She spent 6 years in the Navy as a fire direction control officer. I teased her and I said, "Oh, you put out fires on the ship?" And she said, "No, when I pushed the launch button, we created fires elsewhere."
And Lindsay's amazing. She joined Dr. Walden on the educational cruise for veterans last November on Veterans Day. So she's amazing. You really did assemble quite a crew there, and they continue the tradition of helping our brothers and sisters in arms. let's get to the hot topic, because down the road we're going to have a regular segment. It's not going to be every week, but we're going to have a regular segment where we bring you in about hot topics regarding mental health. So everybody keep tuned for that. If nothing else, keep tuned for that. But let's talk about something that you are so expert in, and that is this ongoing crisis we have with particularly combat vets coming back, trying to reassimilate with, regular society, but they suffer this 4 initial diagnosis. Tell us what that is. Give us a little.
Well, it's really almost all of it relates to a function of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I understand and I'm aware and I respect that the military calls it post-traumatic stress. They like to stay at PTS. They like to steer away. If some of you watch the Navy SEAL show, you'll see they refer to it as PTS. They like to steer away from the disorder, and I understand that. You don't want to take a negative approach if the person's going to heal in a matter of a short time. But post-traumatic stress disorder has been around for quite some time. At the University of Denver, and I'm dating myself.
Let me interrupt you. You mentioned that for some time. Used to be known by other names in past wars.
Oh, yes, shell shock. We have various manuals that call it various things over time. The irony for me was that in the diagnostic manual number 1, it was called shell shock. And apparently they must have had really, really good therapists back then, because in the diagnostic manual number 2, it disappeared. It didn't exist. That's right. It came back in the diagnostic manual number 3 as post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And so it's
might be combat fatigue also, along with
it was called that back then too. And so it's been identified but not frequently acknowledged. And actually it was interesting because back in the day I actually ended up doing an article at that time when our soldiers came back from Panama. And when the soldiers came back from Panama, I was shocked to find out that this was the first time that the military was perhaps recognizing post-traumatic stress. And so I was interviewed by a Ronald Smothers from the New York Times, and he wrote an article about it on the front page of the New York Times. And I just so happened to have that here on the desktop. But it shocked me that this was the first time that folks were actually acknowledging post-traumatic stress disorder. And he opens the article.
Look at this, everybody. Look on your screen, and you can screenshot this and read the particulars later. But
now the interesting part is that he says here, and this shocked me because I'm like, hasn't everybody been doing this before? It says the Army, which long ignored and even denied that going into combat can cause long-term psychological stress for some soldiers, is now providing counseling to try and avert such problems for troops who recently returned from Panama. So I was shocked by the fact that we were doing this, what seemed to be the first folks doing it. I think it was the fact that finally the military was acknowledging this. And we were fortunate to have a very supportive Corps commander who allowed me to bring out a friend, Tom Williams. And what I was about to say before was when I got started, there wasn't a library of books on PTSD. There was one book, and it was American Legion DAV, or actually a DAV book publication, had a flag on the front, and it was written by Tom Williams. And it was the only book about post-traumatic stress disorder. Now you could probably fill my entire house with books about post-traumatic stress disorder. And as I summarized it back then, it's so important to deal with the aspects of it because it's pay me now or pay me later. It will come back up and get you if you don't address it and if you don't deal with it. And there are ways that commanders can deal with it as well.
I see you're quoting from the article where they quoted you. You were a major back then. You retired as a light colonel.
That's correct. Correct.
That's quite an educational experience to find out that it took till Panama for the DOD to officially recognize that our soldiers are having a specific problem based on their combat exposure, and it's developed from there. I know I interrupted you a few minutes ago.
No, I
Tell me again
appreciate
about
it.
the Denver study. What was going on there?
Well, and there were people there also who were still naysayers. In fact, I had a consultant to the Surgeon General who called me and said, "You shouldn't be doing this. You're upsetting people."
Mm.
So I called my colleague at the office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense, and he sent me a copy of this article that the Assistant Secretary of Defense had looked at. And in the right-hand corner, he had written, "This is great. Are we doing this at other installations?" So whenever anybody questioned me, I just kind of stuck that in their face, and that kind of took care of it. Other ways that commanders can do things. We were blessed in this at Fort Bragg with a Corps commander who understood it, and when he debriefed all 450 Green Tabbers who were involved in Panama, Operation Just Cause, he invited us and gave us 1 hour to talk about mental health, which was unheard of. Unheard of. Having not been in Vietnam, I didn't have the experience. So I invited Tom. He came out for no cost, grabbed his hand and gave him a big Semper Fi as he went up on stage. Very successful. Very successful. We had the assistant deputy commander for the division. The general officer came to our clinic in the afternoon and said, "I've been stuffing this Vietnam stuff forever, and I want to talk about it now."
Wow.
So yeah, it was powerful.
Good.
It was powerful, and we thoroughly enjoyed that opportunity, and that was the start of the party. Well, it's been a blessing to have this process called SPECT, SPECT. Single. It really sounds complicated. You're going to win in You're going to win in Scrabble with this one. Single photon emission computed tomography, which basically means that you're going to be looking at your brain and seeing which parts are too active and which parts are underactive. Take a look at, what we do is, we inject a radio tracer and it traces the brain, and it measures the activity level in the brain, the areas that are deficient in activity and the areas that are overactive. And here you see what's called the healthy brain. I'd like to direct your focus to the healthy brain on the left side. And you see a very healthy brain here. Everything's filled in. Everything's getting appropriately oxygenated. And then down here on the bottom, you say, well, why do you have all that egg salad down there in the bottom? That is the back of your head, the cerebellum. And that would have to be working for you to be thinking, talking, standing, sitting, or whatever the case may be. So that is the healthy brain. And then we're going to look for overactivity and underactivity. Again, this is still another healthy brain, just from a different person. There's not any deficient areas in it. And here we have classic PTSD. Looks pretty messy, doesn't it, Gary?
It does. And you noted there's something specific about those little dots, the little white images that appear. You called it some geometric shape. What do you call it?
I call it the PTSD diamond.
The PTSD
now,
diamond.
We'll start at the top of the diamond. Well, first of all, let's start in the middle. That's the biggest one. We'll start in the middle of the diamond, and it's again, you don't have to remember the words, thalamic nucleus. It's the part of your brain that records all of your emotions. And in the thalamic nucleus there, you see overactivity. What that tells us is we have depression. There's a lot of sadness and depression going on in that part of the brain. Then we move out to the sides. We have two sides here, parallel, and those are called the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia are responsible for our anxiety level. And you see these are popping out of the frying pan here. They are overstimulated. They're more than red hot. They're white hot. White hot.
I see that.
And up at the top of the brain, you have what's called the anterior cingulate gyrus. It's responsible for us being able to let go of things. Your wife, your brother, your sister, a friend at work says something nasty and you think about it all afternoon. Well, this is lit up while you're thinking about it. If you're able to let go of things, this is not going to be lit up.
All right.
And when I say lit up, it's going to be white.
Pause for a minute. Not being able to let go of things. These would be the intrusive thoughts as a symptom of PTSD. Define that a bit more.
You've got it, exactly. And the dreams and the nightmares. This is the same area that gets overstimulated in people who have obsessive compulsive disorder. They just can't let go of things. They constantly ruminate on stuff. So, to make it very, very simple, this is the PTSD diamond. You see it's a diamond shape. It's basically having depression, anxiety, and being stuck on it. That's it. Anxiety, depression, and stuck on it. And so it just keeps going over and over and over again. And it's very hard to get rid of because you hope you go to sleep and wake up and it'll be gone. When you're leaving the military, a lot of times they tell you, oh, you'll get used to this. Maybe when you're 99. But no. I tell folks, if a psychologist says that you can cure PTSD, keep on walking down the road. Find a new psychologist. You can make it better through therapy. You can ease the symptoms so you're not as hypervigilant, so you're not as overreactive, so you're not as angry. And that's what we do in therapy. I have some guys that have attended our therapy groups the third Saturday of each month, 10:30 to 12 at Bay Tree Behavioral Health. Some of those guys, I asked a few of them from MIMS. I said, hey, you're some of the old timers. You've been here since the beginning. I said, do you realize you've been coming here one Saturday a month for the last 22 years?
Wow.
Yeah.
But they keep coming because they've recognized the benefit of
exactly
that therapy, right?
Exactly. And they've developed a relationship. And quite honestly, with my white beard, I tell them we all got old together. So, and you really do. And you learn. I run the group, and I tell you, every time I do the group, I learn something from the group members.
And that's why we want to include Soldier Heart's song Road to Recovery as your bumper music, as your intro music, because that's what it is. It is a road to recovery.
It's a road to recovery. Exactly. And it keeps you from getting in trouble with the law, and it keeps you from getting in trouble with relationships and having one after the other. It allows you to be a good model for your children. It allows you to interact much better with society. And I can tell you, the guys who've come to that group, even for a short period of time, have noticed the difference. And I left the country one month and canceled the group, and I learned what a mistake that was. I was in trouble.
Well, sure, because they come to expect that, and then it's like having the rug pulled out from under them, even if it's temporary. But somebody that's dealing with, and it's classified as an anxiety disorder. Am I right?
That is correct. It's under the anxiety branch of disorders, largely because the predominant issues are anxiety in reaction to a trauma.
Well, anxiety define anxiety for somebody like me. Just tell me, what is anxiety?
I'm glad you asked about that, because there's something, we have stress in our lives. We have stress in our lives. And I sometimes refer to some kind of stress, anxiety, producing stress, as eustress. Not eustress me, but eustress, eustress. That's kind of a healthy kind of anxiety. I know I have to go to work at 9 o'clock. About 8:30, I start looking at, oh my gosh, I better hop in the shower quick because I need to get there. Traffic on the road. That's eustress. I got a test coming up. I need to study a few days in advance. That's eustress. Things that kind of get us off our butt, get the Velcro off the couch, and get going and do what we need to do. Now, distress is something a little bit different. When we as human beings are distressed, it throws our brain out of kilter. It mobilizes the fight or flight response, and it results in us stressing our body and stressing our mind.
So not just the mind, but the entire body can be impacted.
Oh, exactly. I worked with, distress. I worked with a Vietnam veteran who unfortunately had to play dead in Vietnam with the other fellow service members who were dead. And he had to play dead as the Viet Cong walked over the bodies. That's more than eustress. That's distress in a big way. So that image keeps coming back in dreams and nightmares. And it makes it difficult to survive. You can experience that, anytime you lay down. If there's like a group of people in the room, boom, it would bring that all right back.
And we deal with this best obviously through the therapeutic process, but there's a host of medications, SSRIs, all type, all
Sure.
and they're an adjunct to it. But more importantly, to get these men and women that are impacted by PTSD into a, if not a group setting, an intensive patient-doctor relationship along with the medicine, right? To start to make some headway.
Absolutely. You're right on track, because all of our research shows that the combination of medications and therapy it produces the most positive outcomes. And at a future time, we'll discuss the two right images, the four images on the right side there, which involve traumatic brain injury, as you can almost see right here. Brain not getting the oxygen it should have, and you see it here and here and here. So there is the possibility of having a combination of traumatic brain injury and PTSD, or having just a traumatic brain injury. So in future sessions, we'll talk about that and talk about the impact. But it's so important to know, the most important thing in mental health is, number one, recognizing that you have it, assessing it, and number two is finding a way, finding your way to a number of different types of treatment. Speaking of medications, I reached out to a number of my old classmates from the University of Denver, and one of my classmates, Libby Call, who's currently working at Harvard with Bessel van der Kolk. He's kind of the father of study of PTSD, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And he and Libby are currently, along with a team, are currently addressing and analyzing and researching to see if any of these bizarre psychedelic, psychotropic medications might have a positive impact with PTSD. So finally, instead of just trying something off the street, we will actually have some research that shows what works and what doesn't.
And the efficacy of something that God brought to us in its natural form versus some pharmacological agent, I can't stress that enough. But people, listen, this is Doc Fairchild. He is going to be hosting Heal the Warrior, Heal the Country episodes in the future. And as he just alluded to, there's so much we can talk about, from TBI to just straight depression, even military sexual trauma. He's expert in all these areas, in particular as it relates to our past and present military member community. So I want to again thank you, Doc, for joining us for this inaugural restart of Heal the Warrior, Heal the Country. And I just thank you so much for everything you've done in your career and continue to do to help our brothers and sisters in arms. It means that much to me. So thank you, sir, and we'll see you next time on American Warrior Radio Show.
Thank you, Garen, for being the flagpole out in front and carrying us forward. We appreciate that, for being the guide on. And we look forward to connecting with you again in the future. You have a great afternoon.
Brother man, you know it. Thank you so much. And for all you listeners out there, please don't share this. Share what you just heard with people you think it might positively impact, which is basically anybody, whether they're military or not. This is great information coming to you from Dr. Scott Fairchild here on American Warrior Radio Show. And as I always say, don't forget, thank a vet. Hi everyone, it's Garen Cohn with American Warrior Radio. I'm here with my good friend Christian. We're here to deliver a very important message about a crisis in our land.
Suicide prevention, more specifically, veteran suicide prevention.
22 a day are taking their own lives. This must stop. This can't continue. If you or someone you know is contemplating suicide, please know that God has tomorrow planned for you. Don't take your own life. And just remember, suicide is a permanent solution
to a temporary problem.